So it kind of seems like right now, there's kind of a lull in terms of like prominent top of the card stories that we care about week to week for the men's division. I'm not gonna say wholly in general that the WWE is kind of cooked. I just think really it's the men's division that's really mid right now. I think there's some interesting stories that can be kind of played, and we're kind of now seeing them. I think the whole Jey Uso kind of power corrupting him, and Roman kind of influencing Jey to become more of like a tribal chief type, where you have Jimmy kind of looking in the sidelines, kind of concerned. I think this is a whole narrative arc that is extremely interesting and should be actually explored for this feud. The whole Vision storyline, kind of, especially after CM Punk and AJ Lee seem to kind of bow out from that after getting the victory at WrestlePalooza. It does seem like there's a lot of heat that was lost there, because now without an AJ Lee to oppose Becky Lynch right now, and kind of that feud to be an ultimatum, it seems like they're just kind of running around aimlessly almost, especially with this week where it seems like Roman kind of came out with no plan, and then Bronson kind of came out and Heyman came out, and they didn't seem to have a plan either. Roman even initiates the conversation with, so you're gonna stare at me? What do you have to say today? And it kind of begs for me to answer or ask the question on whether or not we are even booking like week to week anymore. It seems like they kind of show up to the shows, and a lot of times it's like more of an aura forming contest with the men when they come out for those segments. The first 20 minutes of Raw usually has someone with almost a 10+ minute entrance come out, kind of bask in the crowd, and then kind of either lay out a match or just get interrupted by, whoever the most prominent heel is. And like right now with the Vision, Braun and Bronson, there doesn't seem to be an actual goal for the two, except for just annoying the top faces. Like, are they trying to go for the tag titles? Are Braun and Bronson gonna go for maybe some mid-level titles so that they can have maybe an old gold evolution situation with Seth Rollins? It doesn't seem like there's like a coherent narrative for the Vision, especially with this crown jewel thing happening. And now it seems like Cody and Seth are kind of doing their own thing, where they're kind of bringing back all the kind of motifs and everything that brought Seth and Cody together initially, before at WrestleMania 40, and then even before that when Cody came back and re-debuted at the expense of Seth Rollins. There's a big history there that they are currently kind of delving into. However, this is now at the expense of a whole faction that Seth has set up, that is supposed to be this menacing piece. And it's like, with Cody and Seth feuding, I think that's excellent if you then play or have the Vision come into play. I don't think it should be just a non-entity, or it should be a thing where they're just kept separate, because then in the eventuality where Seth does beat Cody because of their interference, it's not necessarily something where like, yeah, we knew it's telegraphed and it's gonna happen, I'm glad you didn't tease it. It's more of like, why didn't we build this properly so it makes sense that the Vision come in, and not that just out of nowhere, since they were separated, I guess just to justify a Seth victory and to also protect Cody in terms of him losing clean, you have the Vision coming. What you should do is just like that first initial promo that Cody kind of had with Seth, discussing whether or not he should kind of be friends with Cody or respect him, and it's like Seth's obsession with wanting to beat him, right, kind of takes over. That's, I think, a good plot point, but I think in that he should be using the Vision, he should be justifying their existence to Cody because it does serve that Vision. And I think that's a kind of a flaw on the writing, I guess, part of Raw, or I guess a kind of a character flaw to kind of work on with Seth. Maybe he should kind of knowingly know, like, okay, wait, I need to be kind of putting over the Vision as well with this, and not just kind of bringing it back to just a simple Seth Cody feud, especially when we're just brushing off CM Punk and AJ Lee as if that didn't just happen, as if Becky Lynch is now not part of the Vision. I do like that now Becky's kind of gotten over her head. She has now that L to Maxine Dupree, in which was an amazingly booked match that won people over, where at the start the crowd was not engaged into it, but slowly the story that Becky and Maxine told over time got them to really root for Maxine. And I think now we are looking forward to what comes out of that feud, that small Mina feud, and what that can do for someone like a Maxine. And that's why it kind of brings me back to the point where it seems like in the women's division now there is that thorough line connection between a lot of different wrestlers and people, whereas the men's division now feels like everything is separated on an island. And that was the opposite issue that I had initially kind of going into 2025, where besides, you had your besides the Rhea and Liv vortex that existed at the time, most of the women felt like they were isolated and on their own. Now that we have kind of the whole Kyrie, Io, Asuka triangle with Rhea involved, there's something for all these top women to do that's not necessarily just a world title chase, right? And it's been extremely compelling because all these women are giving it their all. Asuka is amazing in this crazy kind of badass boss like role where she knows she has the admiration of Io and Kyrie, right, and is abusing that, which as a heel would, and it's an excellent story. I think Kyrie wrestling and struggling with having to want everyone to stay together and to please Asuka and do something for herself. You see that in her. Those types of things are what we should be exploring for the men as well, because I feel like the men character-wise are extremely static, except for literally just Bloodline members who seem to be the only ones who go through a change to necessitate things happening in this story, right? I think everyone else, like your LA Knights, your CM Punks, right, your Seth Rollins, and even your Codys, don't necessarily change and evolve over time depending on their opponents. It becomes more of like a clash of egos to justify which character is the stronger character, which I think just doesn't help. It puts us in the position we are now, where interesting things can't happen, where Triple H feels like he can't take the title off of a Cody to do something interesting with the plot because of where he feels he needs everyone to be on a certain totem pole. I think that makes it so the men's storylines don't feel as engaging. There was a difference when Jey Uso was the world heavyweight champion compared to Seth Rollins, because there was a volatility to Jey holding that title, which made everything interesting, which made it interesting when he would put up the title against Seth on a random week on a Raw, or now we are seeing like who he can endure next, because we don't know if he's holding on to that title, which creates the intrigue. Right now for the men's division, there's literally zero intrigue except for the whereabouts of John Cena and the match he's going to have with AJ Styles, which once again, not to the credit of WWE, but was completely hyped up by everything else. Nothing to do with WWE or how they tackled that situation. Which brings us back to, I think, what everyone is kind of speaking on, is that WWE does feel extremely, like it feels like it's in a rut right now, despite, I think, creatively it not necessarily being as bad as it was in Vince era. We're at a point right now kind of where it feels like a lot of complacency. It feels like things aren't necessarily moving forward for the men's division. It's just we're spinning on our wheels and there's nothing building up for feuds. Like, for example, Dominic has the AAA title and the IC title, and instead of it being instead of them being a focal point of Raw, the Judgment Day seems to be more of like a bathroom break or a six-man tag heater to get the crowd woken up, instead of just advancing the Judgment Day story and the dissension between Finn, JD, and the rest of the crew with Dom. But in the pacing that they do all these things, they like to sit around on these triggers that can be pulled, and then without any build up or warning pull these triggers and then look back at us and say, hey, we were doing it the whole time, y'all just didn't pay attention. No, we are paying attention, which is why we see the redundancy in the week to week booking, right? Whereas there's a lot of pieces that are there. For example, with Roman slightly every week kind of inching Jay towards a more militant tribal like attitude, that should be something that is highlighted through highlight packages, not just a recap of the same main events we're having over and over again, where we just have a blitz finish where everyone comes out and attacks, right? Because at some point you can't just rely on the Roman return pop, because he's back now, right? Where are we going with the storyline? What is the result of the vision, all right? Was the result of the vision simply the cash-in that happened at SummerSlam? Was that all that everything was leading to and planning? Because you would think then, okay, we have a chase now between CM Punk and Seth for the title, which hasn't been actualized yet either, because CM Punk seems to be nowhere to be found except for wanting to pick fights with LA Knight and the rest of the top of the card for the sake of that they're on the top of the card, and no one seems to be targeting Seth Rollins. Is it because he's busy with Cody? That doesn't mean anything. There should be a point that Seth is losing focus on his title because he's so obsessed with Cody, right? It just seems like there's so many things for them that they could be doing, but they're not actively paying attention to, that it does feel like everything's just coasting. And then even with the promos, they don't feel meticulous or deliberate, but as if in real time, both performers are trying to figure out what they can do to salvage a situation where they were just told to go out there and hype up something. The women, it does feel like there's a lot of built-in storylines kind of happening with Becky, with Io Sky, and that triplet kind of thing happening with Kyrie and Asuka. And then even on SmackDown, the budding division over there, kind of with the US title thing going on with Julia and Michin and Chelsea. And then you have, you know, your world title or your WWE titles picture with, you know, Tiffany, Nia, Jade, now kind of firmly a top contender for that title, I would say, you know. So, you know, it does seem like there's so many more prospects for the women in terms of like stuff that can happen down the line and big matchups that can happen. Whereas for the men, it's like we're already retreading steps, and it seems like we just kind of need something to spice things up. Let me know what you guys kind of think. Is WWE just mid in general right now, or is it really just a glaring problem with the men's division? You know, maybe a lack of focus that seems to be permeating there, you know. So let me know what you guys think. You know, Raw and SmackDown still aren't bad. They aren't bad, but they're not great, and that's a problem.